Right, everyone, thank you for joining and welcome to OT Security Connect. I'm Eliot Davies, founder of the community and recruitment business Quanta Hire. At the OT Security Connect community is to enable collaboration and learning opportunities for ICS and OT security professionals. So in this session, we're going to tackle one of the most pressing issues facing OT environments, and it's the urgent need to build a robust cybersecurity talent pool to safeguard ICS and OT businesses. The need for cyber resilience in OT has never been more critical. And according to a recent white paper by the World Economic Forum, there's already a global shortage of 4 million cybersecurity professionals. By 2030, the gap is projected to widen drastically, with an estimated shortfall of 85 million workers. And they estimate that this could result in an $8.5 trillion unrealized annual revenue loss. So today we're facing the challenge of the skills gap. And why is it hard to solve? So just to set the picture, there's a multitude of challenges. Firstly, you've got specialized skill sets. OT security demands a blend of IT, cybersecurity, and industrial control system knowledge. Next, you've got rapid changes. So the swift pace of IT and OT convergence increases complexity and vulnerabilities. There's limited training, so there's very few educational programs focusing on this niche. So hands-on experience is quite hard to come by. And then you've got awareness and investment. Many organizations underestimate OT risks and underinvest in security measures. There's high demand, global shortage of cybersecurity professionals, so it's intensifying the competition for talent, and compliance pressures as well. So evolving regulations and certification requirements are adding to the challenge. So I'll stop talking. Here to guide us through today, we've got a panel of OT security leaders. So let's run through some quick introductions. Kim, if you could get us started and do your quick introduction, let everyone know who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Elliot. So my name is Kimberley Dick. I currently work for GSK pharmaceutical company. I'm an OT security manager. I've been doing that for the past 5 years. My background is primarily in engineering, so I came into the OT space having absolutely no knowledge or prior knowledge. So it's actually really quite relevant me being here today to be able to share my experiences and my insights as well on this topic.
Right, Kim. And Sam, we'll move on to you next.
Yep. So Sam Taylor, I'm a contractor working for Infinium at the moment, which is a waste to energy organization. They then are also now looking at doing carbon capture within that. I have been helping and managing their OT cybersecurity program now for just over a year. And previous to that, I was actually at GSK, and before that, Johnson Matthey, helping and supporting them with their OT cybersecurity program. So that's why I'm here.
Magic, thank you. And John?
Hi, John Allen. Hi, Kim. Lovely to meet you. I spent 23 years at GSK and set up the OT security program that Kim's probably dealing with now. And I have to reinforce the value of engineering in OT is extremely high. So 23 years GSK, prior industry experience elsewhere. Currently, I do freelance consulting as well as being a non-executive director for a company called Harpoon Consulting. And it's good to meet you all.
And last but not least, Asif.
Hi, Asif this side. I'm working as a manager in one of the big four consulting firms. I do have almost a decade of experience, and yeah, I'm happy to share my thoughts and lovely to meet you all.
Right, thanks everyone. So let's get this discussion started, and we'll start with building cybersecurity skills into existing OT professionals. So if I start with Kim, because I think, Kim, your background's actually perfect for this. I know you started as an instrument technician with GSK and obviously moved up through the ranks into security management. So what specific skills would you recommend ICS and OT professionals focus on to develop and enhance their cybersecurity capabilities?
Yeah, I think for me, like just obviously, as Elliot said, I started off as an instrument technician in GSK and worked my way up, ended up being in engineering contracts management for a couple of years as well, before then actually almost kind of being a bit poached into the OT security program. Something I'd never heard of, and that's me being completely 100% transparent. And that when I was approached, I was like, never heard of it, you know, because I was just so focused and tunnel visioned on that sort of engineering path. Never really was such a big business priority at that point. But they were obviously starting to build the OT security program, as John knows, and it became such a big business focus. They were trying to employ people into that space. Now, I think, as John mentioned, I think having an engineering background certainly helps with going into OT security. I'm not saying that you have to have an engineering background, but it certainly does help. I think understanding the assets and, you know, for me, understanding the instrumentation, the control systems, having that prior experience definitely helps if you're stepping into an OT security role. But it's not the be all and end all. But I do think that, yes, certainly a first point for me to advise is to certainly get to know the environment that you're going to be working in, understand how it operates, how the production, whether it's a manufacturing site, whether it's whatever the environment might be, start to understand the control systems, how they operate, etc., and start to really familiarize yourself with that, because it makes it a hell of a lot easier if you can actually visualize and you've actually seen firsthand and understand how the plants operate or how the environments operate. And then you go into OT security, because, you know, until you have that familiarization of the systems, then I certainly do think it helps. Yeah.
John, what do you think with that kind of approach? Do you think that learning the fundamentals of the ICS systems, I guess, and the, you know, helps to then build that layer you need to learn security on top?
Yeah, it's a great topic, this. So and fundamentally, GSK wouldn't have succeeded without the engineering folks involved. So knowing the environment is really important, and the fundamental differences between IT and OT are, you know, an OT environment can cause catastrophic failures in safety, etc. So getting to know your asset base first, as Kim said, it is fundamental. And a lot of companies fail because they go out and they say, let's just buy technology, without actually understanding where they're starting. So, and then knowing what they are, how they work together, which product lines are worth more money than others, where you want to focus on, and then what vulnerabilities you got out there is really important. In terms of skills, definitely asset and vulnerability management, good risk management and continuous risk management skills are important in that space. And actually, and I always say this, and people that know me will be sick of me saying this, OT security is about people, process, and technology. It's not just about technology. So understanding the cultures in the business that need to accept what on earth does this OT security thing mean is really important. And translating that into, oh, by the way, you've got supply chain continuity risk of X million, X billion, makes it much more realistic. And that's where the engineering team are fundamental, because they can understand their assets, say, right, these ones look after a really expensive line, that's got high risk, therefore that's where we need to start.
Perfect. What are your thoughts on this, Asif? I mean, do you have a different point of view, or do you agree with the guys?
Yep, I agree with John and Alan. And to be honest, skill-wise, I think the first would be to start with the cybersecurity governance, because it will give a gist to understand why and what question to all the people like automation engineers existing that we have. And it's very important. And technical wise, I would say network security would be a prime skill set. Why? Because majority of the controls that you could apply on the systems are network related, to be honest, because we have some legacy system XYZ, many reason arounds. And to be honest, I mean, because if someone who's coming from the automation background, their inputs are very valuable. As John mentioned, they know the system, they know everything, because we have seen traditionally cyber is coming from the IT side. They define the strategy, they define the program, they define the policy standard. But when you apply a low-level procedures in the manual to perform those tasks, that's where you will find their inputs very valuable, the automation engineer, because they know their assets well, they know their system well.
Magic. Okay. So have we got examples of building security skills and how that's benefited ICS and OT professionals in their careers? Sam, you might have a good point of view on this, and it's really about, you know, what's the value of learning this for OCS and ICS, for OT and ICS professionals?
Yeah, so I've actually just been building out a program for the maintenance and EC&I engineers at the organization. And the main thing that we're trying to do is trying to do some practical exercises within that. So you can actually see fundamentally what could happen and how it could go wrong. And I think that's so critical for the kind of operational side of things, because, you know, classroom training is really hard. Theory is great, and procedures are great. I mean, you know, operations are very good at procedures and they're very good at following them, but giving them that hands-on kind of experience is so critical. So yeah, I was just speaking to an organization this morning. We were just finalizing the training for each one of the sites, but they actually get to kind of see, touch, and also see what happens in a kind of ransomware attack within that kind of environment, which is going to be really important for them going forward.
Kim, I guess what did it do? What has it done for you? So moving away from just focusing purely on the ICS systems and learning cybersecurity. So how would you say that that's, I guess, benefited and kind of, you know, added value to your career?
I think, yeah, it's certainly added value to my career. It's certainly a space that, as I mentioned, you know, it was something that I was not previously involved in, didn't have prior knowledge on. I think it now allows me to have a different perspective on things. So when I look at systems now, I also think about the cybersecurity risks associated, whereas previously I never so much thought about that. I think people, and John will probably know this, that there always is such a massive focus on safety in EHS. And I think that when cybersecurity became a big focus as well, the culture shifted, and it was trying to get people to buy into, okay, but like cybersecurity is just as important, if not more at times. So I think it allows me to look at things from a different angle, through a different lens, knowing now that there's obviously cybersecurity risks. I know what to look for now. Again, just as Sam was mentioning, giving people that physical or that practical training is very, very useful. We actually do instant response exercises, worked really, really well, whereby we've almost had them in that kind of environment, everyone in a room, and we went through instant response exercises, and it was a really fantastic thing to do, because you can give people training materials, you can get them to sit through modules, you can put them through training courses, etc. But actually doing that practical experience is very, very worthwhile. We've got so much value out of that. And I actually think it's opened a lot of people's eyes more to the importance and the consequences of a cybersecurity attack. And I think it's definitely paid off doing that. But certainly for me personally, it's made a massive difference just coming from that kind of engineering background, whereby I probably didn't necessarily always think about the cyber risks because I wasn't aware of that space. But now that I'm in that space and I'm living in that space and work in that space, then I certainly look at things very, very differently.
And to build upon that, you know, cybersecurity, if you were to take out all of those safety controls that you put in, I mean, that's fundamentally, and that's the kind of like mental shift that I've had to go through, is you've got an ability to kind of, through cybersecurity, somebody could hack into those systems and remove all of your safety controls. And that's kind of, for me, that's the terrifying bit that keeps me up at night.
Yep.
Why is it important to invest in cybersecurity skills? So what's the value for them? What direction do you think that this can take people in the future? You know, does it open up, you know, new career opportunities, add value to them as individuals? You know, so what do you think that the real benefits and upsides are of investing personally in your own cybersecurity skills when you're, you know, an OT and an ICS professional? Asif, if we'll start with you on that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, the first benefit, definitely, if you're promoting culture of cybersecurity, in that case, like not the individual, but as a whole, definitely it's gonna improve your resilience. In short, it has a lot of benefit, but individually, we have seen, like I had a privilege to work with one system integrator where they have defined a team of mixture, you can say. Like, I'm coming from IT background, I was a pen tester before, I have seen someone from automation background, and when you amalgamate all those skills into one, I think you could leverage a lot of benefit out of it. Because in OT, I think the professional who are already in OT, automation engineers, if you're upskilling them and if they are into cyber and they are learning a lot of cyber verticals, I think they can implement the controls and all those things which is coming from the governance in a better way, because they, coming to the point of John, they know their system, they know their environment, they know all the safety and HSE parameters, and definitely the benefit goes for them. And we have seen a lot of example in the industry of that.
John, is it same for you as well? Is this similar to what Asif is saying in terms of its, same value, same benefits to the individuals? Have you got a different take?
No, I'm aligned. I was trying to think of answering it slightly differently. So if you're sitting there thinking, hey, do I move out of my engineering career or even my IT career into being a cybersecurity OT specialist? And there's different ways of looking at it. And a lot of the OT cyberspace, and I can harp on about this for ages, but I won't, is very much threat driven. It's all very negative, and it feels like you're a battle force going in the background. But then you turn it around and say, actually, cybersecurity is about enabling a securely connected supply chain to help your digital growth agenda. So you turn it into a positive, and then you start thinking about, well, why would I want to move into that? Well, one is you get a key line of sight to a given agenda for a company. And the other one is there's just massive breadth and depth in the career opportunity. So as you mentioned, 85 million by whenever it was, 2030, I can't remember.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
similar numbers in the US, they're going from 12 billion to 25 billion investment in those skills capabilities. So as a career move, it's a massive market that there's a massive shortfall in. And when you get there, you can either come in, as an engineer that's doing deployment or an engineer that's doing operations, but there's multiple roles and multiple dimensions and depth and breadth. And I actually think the great thing about a career development opportunity there is actually rapid acceleration and movement of people. So you could start one day being a kind of SOC type resource that's looking at incidents and responding to. The next day you could be moving into asset and inventory management, deployment, and so on. So as a career with variety, I think it's there. And then from an importance point of view, again, in the engineering mindset, safety first. I talk about cyber safety when I talk to an engineer. There's a real value in what you can add in that particular agenda. It's a massive career opportunity. And I hate to say this, it usually pays good money as well.
And as somebody famous once quoted, I think, it's better to train people and then they leave than not train them and they stay.
Yeah, I like that. It's great.
It's true what you say, John, that it's a rapidly sort of evolving space and that your day-to-day work could be completely different. There's loads of variation, and that's one thing that I noticed from stepping out of being an engineer, just working on the same things day in, day out, where it becomes a little bit mundane. It becomes an environment where there's so much going on. I started off working in defence in depth projects, and then I moved into firewall deployment, and now I'm doing network segmentation, global rollout. So it's like I've moved, and that's only in the past 5 years that I've probably moved within 3 different sections or 3 different topic areas, and I've learned so much from that as well. So in terms of learning, and the amount of content out there within cybersecurity, I definitely think it's a very, very good career move. Yep.
I think that I come from probably 10 years in IT security and recruiting for consultancies, and I think the domain of cybersecurity is so broad. There's so many specialisms that exist within it. I think that can be a real positive for some people who want to work across everything and really learn cybersecurity as a whole, or that can be overwhelming for some people. But actually, you can find specialisms within that you can really build expertise within, whether it's SOC, as John mentioned, and responding to incidents and responding to security events, application security, network security. If you find something that you really love, you can really go deep in that one subject as well. So there's if someone's looking at it and going, it's a big subject and it's quite scary, actually it can work quite well to focus in one area as well, I think.
You can be a subject matter expert in any of those fields. So you could be a subject matter expert in firewalls, you could be a subject matter expert in network segmentation, or, for example, patching and vulnerability management and things like that. It could be just that subject matter expert. But if you also are someone who aspires to be a leader or aspires to be a manager, there is that breadth of all of those subjects encompassed into one. So if you're someone who's maybe a bit more technical minded, that you just like to work in the one thing and you really want to build yourself up and specialize in that area, then that's also an option. But equally, if you're someone who's a bit like, well, I don't really want to just focus on one thing. I kind of like having that breadth of everything, and you more want to go down that leadership route, then there's also that ability to do that as well. So yeah, there's two options. You don't need to be a deep technical expert if that's not what you aspire to be. If you do want to be more of an all-rounded leader or a well-rounded leader, then there's that option as well.
Yeah, I think an important thing for me on a personal note was really, it may not work for everybody, was line of sight. And what I mean by that, to make this real, I couldn't get a hepatitis B vaccination when Merck were taken out by NotPetya, which was a $1.3 billion settlement. And as we used to have this lovely saying, Kim, that you might recall, which was, at the end of the supply chain, there's a person. And for me, that line of sight that says, well, if we get a cyber attack that takes out, to Sam's point, a safety system or data systems, and we can't supply products to a person that is critical medicine, whether it's product in pharmaceuticals or energy or water or oil and gas, that's a really good line of sight. And the flip side as well, and I'll say it again, is it's also on the positive note about, well, actually doing this, we're enabling a secure platform for digital transformation. And that's a failure mode in many companies where OT is an afterthought when it should be part of a digital agenda. So.
Yeah. And that's the double-edged sword, right? It's the one thing that you get to sleep at night because you're doing something that's good and valuable, but on the other side, it's terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to pause there because I think we'll move on to the next subjects in the session, which is more from the employer's point of view. And how do you recruit new talent into cybersecurity, and particularly obviously within the ICS and OT industry? Big challenge there, very short supply of security experts in the field, which I think is a great opportunity for people that want to learn it. But Asif, could you start us off around what strategies should ICS and OT industry employ to attract new talent? How would you go about attracting new cybersecurity talent?
I mean, if I start with our freshers and the newcomers, I think a targeted apprenticeship scheme is the better way to approach youngster who might be interested in this space. Like personally, I'm aligned with some of the non-NGOs who are providing apprenticeship and providing OT, IoT skills so that young people will have that knowledge. All right, this is also a subject matter in cybersecurity. And when it comes to employer side, definitely first stress have to be like to train their own people, definitely train them. And I mean, I can see from the employer side, there is too much reliance on certification and the very, very expensive certification. There is a reliance on that. However, I would say there shouldn't be a case. We should go for the skills and all those stuff. And yeah, the first one would be the apprenticeship. The second one would be to train own people. And if that's not the case, then definitely go to the market and provide better remuneration to the people.
Okay. So I'm gonna interrupt. Sorry to interrupt right now, but we've got a question from Jermaine, and he's got to drop off at 12:30. So I'm keen to get this in. He's asking whether ESG concerns are part of OT, and if so, could we expand on its role within this approach?
So ESG is now one of the S's is now security. They kind of want to fit it into as ESSG. But yeah, no, it's so critical within an organization. We've got it within our kind of reports that go out on what we're doing within that space. So I think it's one of the areas that will grow significantly going forward. I think in the US it's becoming kind of more critical because it's part of their SEC filings as well. So they have to include things like risks, etc., and what they're doing about them, as well as if they have an incident. So it's, yeah, for me, yes.
Good stuff. I would just point out as well to anyone that's on the call that wants to ask questions, the Q&A is open. So feel free. I see a couple of hands being raised, but best to put them in the Q&A.
To be transparent, I had to Google ESG, and I agree with Sam.
Yeah, it's fine.
So did I.
Yeah. It's environmental sustainability. Yeah, to be fair, like this is the one area. So one thing that I will like to call out is acronyms. Many years ago, we sat in a meeting once and we were like, what does RMS even stand for? And we all just sat there and we went, we don't know. We use it all the time. we have no idea what that acronym actually stands for, and yet, so yeah, it's one area that I would like to look at further of how do we kind of broach that, because it's a bit like now. I mean, I'm talking to suppliers and they're like, well, it's not really a SOC, it's an MDR, because the MDR is what Gartner calls it, and I'm just like, stop. Explain to me what it is. Stop using an acronym as to what you're going to give me, because I'd like to know what is. I need to go back to the business, and I can't just go, you get one of these acronyms, and they go, oh great, that's the one we wanted, because I've got to go and explain it to them.
So I'm going to move back into the recruitment strategies part, just to get us back on subject, and we'll move. There's more Q&A questions building up, but we'll get round to them later on as well. We were talking about what strategies should employers use to attract new talent into cybersecurity roles. Is there any innovative recruitment practices or partnerships that have helped to bring new talent in, whether it's educational partners, training partners, or even an approach to your recruitment strategy, i.e., skills-based recruitment? So, I mean, John, how about for yourself? I mean, with the extra experience in leading these programs, what worked for you?
Yeah, so my mind's kind of boggling on this one, because there's lots of answers, and I just will call out, I love the way Sam talked about developing with hands-on cyber sort of labs as an important sort of stream as well. I think there's a quote from ESO of years past when I asked him, what's your biggest problem? What would your dream be? And his answer was, my biggest problem is the government industry isn't doing anything about building cyber talent capability. So I took that as, well, okay, we need to get more university paths, etc., etc. But when I think about it, it's a paradigm actually, because you take a seasoned engineer and attract them in, they've got the grounds of understanding OT, and that's a big win. You take a seasoned IT cybersecurity person and you put them into OT, they're going to struggle. So one of the avenues is to take an IT person that's got good security experience and make them work on the engineering shop floor for a year, almost do a qualification in engineering so they get the understanding. So that's another avenue. And then there's a third one, which is the whole concept of externalizing an academy approach, where companies can effectively buy into a program where you get people put on site for a year. I don't think there's any easy answer out there. It's either attract internally or look for placements externally. I hope, and I'm a bit nervous, and I'm not going to contradict Asif here, but the thing that I'm an old. How can I put it? I'm old, right? And it's really easy to say, oh, you've got to have all these seasoned people to do it. But there is an extent of taking somebody that's fresh out of university and getting them into an OT, from an OT security expert, is quite a big ask. So I think if you're doing a grad program, then get all the qualifications, but they have to get that hands-on experience on the shop floor. So I guess to summarize that, new into OT, they need to go and work in OT for a year and get some certification. In OT, they can develop their cyber skills on top of what they already know.
Would you say that the onboarding process is as important as the recruitment process? Because you're you're supporting them to get used to the environment.
Yeah, I mean, loads of companies do grad programs, and what they do is a 3-year rotation. So if I was bringing an OT person in from a grad perspective, I'd stick them in 2 or 3 years. You do 1 year in, at least 1 year in a business, and maybe 1 year in the CISO land and 1 year in IT land. I don't know, but that kind of thing it's really down to that individual's expectation when they get to that time to value equation, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years.
Yeah,
We're also
I would agree.
Oh, go on.
I would agree with you, John. I do think that hands-on experience is really fundamental. So I think however that works, that if it is someone from IT coming in, yes, they should definitely get shop floor experience, because we've seen it before where we have students fresh out of university and they come into a manufacturing site and they have absolutely no idea when they're out on the shop floor. They have all the theory behind it, which is fantastic and it's super important, but they don't have the hands-on experience, and that's where I think that is definitely something that we're missing, and that the talent that we are attracting, or the talent that sometimes we bring in, yes, they have multiple certification, qualifications, etc., but they don't have that fundamental shop floor experience. And I think that's something that's a massive gap that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to you've got to give people a chance to get them to learn it, haven't you? Rather than always expecting everybody to instantly know how to adapt and to, adjust to that culture. Would you apply the same kind of train of thought to consulting, Asif? Because it's different, right? You may not have the the luxury of being able to get that embedding experience into the shop floor. So if you're coming into consulting, would you take a different approach?
I think in consulting, usually I served a core OT industry in my past. However, if someone started his career or her career from the day one in consulting, definitely that too will be a struggle in OT, because your base has to be OT. Then on top of that, you can do consulting over it, you can do advisory business over it, or any kind of services you can provide. So, but yeah, on other hand, when it comes to recruiting, we make sure like we are giving enough knowledge to the apprenticeship and grad that they need to understand OT at least, so that even after 5 years, 6 years, if they think they can move into the space, because right now, if we don't give them this knowledge, they are not aware of the subject itself at the very first place. And I'll give a very big shout out to RITEX, Research Institute of Cambridge. They are doing a fantastic job to give a knowledge to everyone, especially the young ones. But I do agree with John's point, which is very true. You can't expect a grad to come over and second day you're going to sending them to shop floor. That will not work.
Yeah.
If there's a place for placement years, if there's university students planning to get into this as a career, is there the capacity within OT environments to take placement students in? They get that year's experience, they come out with their degree, and then they're ready to go once they've got the degree completed.
And in fact, they can provide there are a lot of virtual digital twins platform over there in the market, and we have ourselves as well, so that give them a glimpse of plant before going there. So yeah.
Okay, good. The Q&A questions are building up, so we'll take on another one.
Can I just one slight interjection, because there's a massive elephant in the room. If I was looking for kind of an OT professional, I'd probably phone this guy called Eliot.
Yeah, that's
that's one route as well.
But there are very few specialist recruiters in the field.
Yeah.
So
And then there's conferences. And to be fair, like if you're interested in this, there is so many conferences that you could go to start to kind of understand what this is about. So if you're not quite sure if you want to get into it and you don't want to kind of dedicate a load of money or training, or your organization isn't able to do that, conferences are a great way to just get a better understanding of who's within the kind of sphere that we work within, what's going on, how they're kind of seeing the future. And it's great, and it's just a networking opportunity. And then if you then decide, do you know what, it's not for me, that's kind of probably better than dedicating a load of time and effort towards it. And I went to a Dragos conference recently, and there was a girl there that worked in environmental health, I think it was, and she just messaged Rob Lee and said, "Can I just join? I'm really interested in this." And he said, "Yeah, of course. Like, come along. Like, let me know if you want to have a meeting. I can tell you about what we do, etc." And I think that's if you're truly open-minded and interested in this, it's one way to do it.
Definitely.
But also phone Eliot.
Also phone Eliot, yeah. Phone Eliot. I'll try and help. So this question from Ronan Dunn is quite pertinent to this subject, and there's a lot building up, and we'll obviously try and get round to everyone. What does your desired OT team look like in structure? But I think this is a great question, because if you've got your org chart and your talent map lined up, you can build resilience into that team through succession planning, through having entry-level staff, through spreading out, through spreading out the tasks in the organization between the right people. So I think the structure of an OT team is really important. But what does that desired team look like, and how would you structure it? John, I feel like you've got something there. I can see.
Well, it was more of a question for the question, because you could be talking about an OT deployment team or an OT operating team.
Yeah.
which I think are two different things. I think from an operational point of view, it's interesting because the thing that I always harp on about, and I apologise for this, is an operating model first. And what I mean by that is when you deploy OT security into security into OT environment, there's a whole bunch of questions that suddenly emerge, which is, well, who's accountable for lifecycle management? Who does patching? Who does backup? Who does recovery? And depending on your organization, the answer might be somebody in IT says, oh yeah, we'll do that for IT. And the engineering guys go, no, you're not touching my system, my systems. So you have to have an operating model. And that operating model will have CISO accountabilities, IT accountabilities, because IT might provide perimeter networking and backup and storage services, and an OT accountabilities. So if you've got an organization that's got 3 layers of organizations within it, so CISO, IT, and OT, then you need to build the relevant team. So we ended up partnering with the engineering team. We wouldn't have succeeded without that partnership. And that engineering team, I think, now has at least 25 people in there, and they've got different accountabilities around almost being an advocate, change management, deployment of firewalls. So that OT team will have a structure with a security director in there. Now the IT team, they might have a SOC and a SIEM capability that supports OT, so they'll have a structure there as well. And the CISO team might have an accountability around risk and vulnerability management. So the answer to that question is, it's one of those depends. And if you're a small company, you might have all 3 of those blended into one, but certainly you'd need different capabilities around risk management, security operations center, people looking at external threats and vulnerability management, probably somebody that looks at things like MITRE frameworks and these too. So I'm sorry, I'm not giving a great answer, but it's multiple roles depending on your organization.
Hard to give one answer for everyone.
And to build on that, it's kind of like, you've got your target operating model for the deployment, as John said, and you're looking at, so who's ultimately responsible, but then you need to hand it over. And one of the big things as part of that handover, coming to John's point as well, is it's not just the technology that you've just given, it's the people in the process. And do you know what? A lot of people forget about the hardest part of any kind of project is that change management piece of, now you've convinced the organization that you're going to put a load of technology in, but it doesn't run itself. And now there's a whole group of people who are just inheriting this going, do you know what? I have a day job as well. And I don't, and it's being really specific about how much time they're going to have to dedicate to this new way of working. Because I think, with all of these things, I think we worked it out once that it's about 85% is procedure and people. It's really only the really marginal piece of the technology, and getting that in it's important, because otherwise, you can't manage what you can't measure. But it's people and process.
Thank you, everyone. And thanks, Ronan, for the question. I think you opened up a massive conversation there. And it's also good to see a familiar name in the Q&A. Moving on from, I guess, structure, recruitment, there's also the key component. If you're going to build a resilient team and something that's high performing and functioning well, how do you retain skilled professionals during a talent shortage? If you're going to get a great team functioning in place, you want to keep hold of your best people. What's worked for you in the past for retaining staff, rewarding, keeping people engaged? And because I think this is key for leaders, is how do we keep the best people, and then it obviously enables you to be consistent with the team. Does anyone want to take
one of the big things when I looked at a different organization at the target operating model that we were trying to work to, we were looking at putting some of the OT specialists within the IT teams so that they could report back into the CISO. And that all made sense until we started to look at kind of where is the career progression then, because they want to stay within OT, and therefore their only career progression is to go through the IT side of the map. And that was fundamentally where we started to, as the entire organization started to look at that and go, well, that's going to make people leave. They'll come into the role initially quite excited and then realize that they've got nowhere else to go. So that's their kind of job for life. So being able to give them some sort of progression within that is, for me, kind of critical. And training.
Yeah.
More than that, I'd say it's really important to recognise that OT security is a joint venture between CISO and OT. It is not just an IT career path. That's really important. And the other thing I would add is seeing value and being valued. And what I mean by that is, if you're a person that spends all day, and I feel sorry for these people going through a 50,000 line Dragus report, sorry, Dragus, and trying to work out what that actually means. But for that person to be able to see line of sight to the value they're providing, which to me is usually around supply chain continuity and what if this didn't get resolved type of issues, and then being valued. So if they're being valued by the CISO all the time, but that's not their organization, they need to see that value come out of their organization and OT as well. And again, I'd say enabling career movement and seeing investment in their career is an important thing, and paying them lots of money. So,
Yeah.
That inevitably becomes a great challenge, doesn't it? Because you've got a very competitive landscape there with
Yeah.
But a great opportunity for those doing it. So let's take a look again at the Q&A, because we've got 15 minutes and there's another 10 questions in there. Now we'll try and obviously get through as much as we can, and we'll get back to the agenda as well. But just going back in the question sets, we've got one from Burak. He says some of the best OT security people have come from automation controls backgrounds, but there aren't many of them. So it calls them unicorns. When the need and the struggle is there, why do you think there is such a big shortage? So
I can maybe take this, what we tend to see, and again, it completely depends on the environment or the size of the environment that you're working in. And it goes back to what we were saying before, is that when you've got automation experts who have their day-to-day job, and then you give them OT security on top, it's not their first job. Do you know what I mean? First and foremost, they see themselves as an automation engineer. If you then add that OT responsibility onto the top of them as well, it's sort of few and far between. And I think, again, it goes back to, like, we do have a nominated OT security champion, but that's just one person. Within the rest of that automation team now at Irvine, it's very small, but across bigger sites, you know, across the US and things like that, we have bigger teams. You know, you may have a team of 30 in automation, you still only have one OT security champion. I don't think there's enough people from the top down, and it cascades from the top down, from that very top director level, from the CEO all the way down the business, is that I don't think there's necessarily enough emphasis on OT security within the automation departments. Now that's global across any organization. I think that first and foremost, there's that prioritization of, you're an automation engineer and that's it. And then when you try to add that layer of OT security on, I think it's sometimes hard. So if that message and that importance isn't being driven from the top and cascaded down, then it then becomes very difficult to then attract more people into that space. So they are few and far between, and I do agree, I think they are very rare to find someone who is just as invested in OT security as they are in their day-to-day job as an automation engineer. That's just my take on it.
We've also made the risks bigger, right? So we've over time, we've started to create an interconnected world between IT and OT. So we've had OT suppliers coming to us saying, do you know what we could do? We could do preventative maintenance. All you need to do is send all of your data to us, and then we'll just remote in and fix it before you even know it. So we've been doing that at the same time as going, do you know what? Getting the data out would be really, really good, because we could then look at efficiencies within the plant. And you're going, okay, that's all sounds great. For that connection, is there also an inbound? Oh yeah, there is, but don't worry about that. We don't use it. No, but somebody could use it. Yeah, somebody could use it, but they probably won't use it, because, you know, that would be really bad. And you're looking at it kind of over time, and we just kind of slowly migrated towards a bigger risk kind of landscape. And then we went, oh, do we have anybody that can tell us whether or not we should be doing this? And it's fascinating. You see so many organizations that are chasing after that kind of 6% of, you know, what is the value add, and then forgetting about their kind of 94% of where the majority of your business is generated. The other thing is, it's everybody focused on the IT side of cybersecurity. So you see these big programs that are just focused on, let's spend as much money. And you go to the board, and the board say, so what have you done? Oh, we've done the enterprise risk stuff for IT security. They're like, okay, but does that cover the entire enterprise? Yes. And then you start to dig a little bit deeper and you go, oh, but not the operations, not the bit where we make the money. We didn't do anything on that. And fundamentally, like, some of the boards just haven't understood that all of the investment went into the part of the business that is the support for the bit that produces everything. So I think that's kind of, for me, that's why the shortage has just been exacerbated. It's just, and it will keep getting bigger as organizations start interconnecting things more. And don't get me started on the IoT stuff, or IIoT, I think.
Yeah. Okay, we've got another question from Bell, and it's talking us through the decision-making process when it comes to hiring FTEs versus hiring externally. So either contractors, consultants, or platforms and tools. What's the typical decision-making process look like then for an organization in this? You know, and I guess, does it help or does it make the situation worse if companies aren't hiring FTEs and they are hiring externally to solve the problems? So, Asif, do you have some thoughts on that? Coming from a consulting background, what do you see kind of the typical behaviors from companies on that front?
I mean, I'll give a very typical consulting answer to that. It depends. Because we have some requirement where we need SC clearance and DV clearance people. So definitely in that case, we go for external route, because sometimes it's not possible to, hiring through FTEs and all those stuff. And totally from the consulting background, it depended on the projects. However, from the asset owner perspective, it's more worthwhile to have a view. And I think, John, if you can jump in and give your view, because in consulting, it's totally dependent on projects, to be honest.
Yeah. So now, as I am technically a consultant, I need to be unbiased in my statement. So there's two answers again. One is program, one is operate mode. And I think in a program mode, you might go more consulting on the understanding that you're embedding people that are going to have to operate it in that program. That's really important. That's knowledge transfer. I then think on the operate mode, and it's a real example, I won't mention the company's name. I was working with a company recently, but their mindset was we're 100% outsource. So if that's your company's operating mindset, well, you've got your answer. You're going to go to, sorry about the acronym, SAN, an MMSP, or whatever they are, all these different acronyms you can come up with. Personally, for me, I think, and actually Sam made the point, these are your crown jewels as a company, right? Yeah, in Kim's example, I won't name the site, but we worked out one site in its OT space could have a 4 billion revenue impact through being taken out. These are the crown jewels of the company. So you can outsource that all, and even to big companies, and I'm not going to mention them because I don't want to sort of slate any. Oh, sure, they'll provide you an operating capability for risk management and notification, but they won't add any value. So what are you going to do about that? So I think you've got to find a blend that says, these are my crown jewels. These are the key things that I need to act on internally, and then hire for those roles. And if you decide you're going to outsource some of the more routine stuff, like reading through thousands of reports, then that's fine. So I think it's a blend.
Consulting side, you can stress on capital expenditure of something, but when it comes to OPEX, I think that is long term.
Yeah. And this comes back to the skills gap there as well. So yeah, if you can get the right contractors, consultants, I mean, I worked with pretty much all of them as far as various different programs, and if you can get them in and train, I've personally been trained by, some of these. If you can get them in and you can get that knowledge transfer and you do it properly, then in actual fact, it's brilliant to bring in contractors and consultants. I'm not just saying that because I am one, but it is good because.
Good stuff, guys. Thank you, and thanks for the question, Mal. And so I've got one more question from Q&A before we wrap things up. Time is rapidly passing. We're nearly at the end. This is from an anonymous attendee. But it's quite good because it kind of plays devil's advocate. So how does having 5 to 6 years of experience in the OT field before transitioning to cybersecurity impact professional growth, considering that individuals with 15 plus years of experience often face challenges in adapting to cybersecurity roles, and given that IT has a stronger presence in management and there are fewer long-term OT professionals in system design and commissioning? Do you think that this experience gap affects the effectiveness and career progression of those moving from OT to cybersecurity?
Interesting. So if I give you my kind of where I came from, so I started off life kind of peeling bulbs in the Netherlands. Then I moved on to working for it was like a management development scheme that worked within agriculture. So working kind of in a plant, um, sending out lettuces. It was 24/7 site. It was great. I think I was working about 16 hours a day. And then I eventually worked for Sainsbury's as a product technologist. So no background within kind of, I understood operations. I understood some of the technical aspects of it. And at one point we had a load of lettuces that came off a conveyor belt and I had to work with the engineers to work out how we were going to fix that because, that was a huge loss to revenue. So I didn't come from any of this kind of background, and then eventually worked for the John Lewis Partnership, worked on a data protection program. There I met a load of the cybersecurity teams, and we worked together to kind of build up each other's knowledge of both of those areas. I didn't even know about data protection, but I learned it. I studied it. And then the same thing with cybersecurity. You learn it, you study it, and then you speak to the individuals to understand kind of truly what they're going through. But I get that, like, if we're taking all of these OT people and putting them into cyber, what's left of the operations? But all of these things are all truly kind of, it depends what you want to do with your career. If you want something that is a massive skills gap at the moment, and maybe on the operations, it may not be through automation, etc., then it's a great career to go into. And I've really enjoyed it so far. And I'm continuing to learn every single day. And I love that about kind of any job that I've ever done. Learned about pesticides whilst I worked at Sainsbury's. That was really hard. Had to get my kind of chemistry brain back on tap. But yeah, it's
Depends on the
yeah, it depends on the individual. If you're open-minded and you're willing to learn about anything, I think, go for it, because it's such a fascinating area. And it's one of those areas that when you eventually, so I was saying before in the backstage area, if I can explain it to my kids who are 6 and 9, then I actually know what I'm talking about. And if they ask me a question and I can't answer it, I have to go off and go and do some more research, because in actual fact, I wasn't actually able to do that. I think that was famously Einstein's quote. So if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, you don't know what you're talking about.
I'll just build a little bit, because I think I heard reading between the lines of the question was, why is, say, automations engineer going to be as disciplined as IT in their management practices? It was part of what I heard in that question. And all I would say is, in defense to the engineering and automation, a lot of their role is about process engineering, process automation. So all it is learning a different set of disciplines that they need to put into a process. Mundane things, even like batching and backup and recovery. I think that's well within the remit of that type of capability. I spent most of my career in IT. The last half of it was in manufacturing IT, so I wasn't an automations person, but I had to learn that way from the automation people. And I think automation people are more than capable of learning the other way.
And I guess it brings a complete diversity of thought, doesn't it, into cybersecurity approaches, because you've got that background coming into trying to solve problems.
I think it just really stems back to the fact that it's really just down to the individual itself. If I kind of look into that question, see it as, okay, right, if there's a gap there, are we maybe the ones that are creating the gap because we're too scared to step out with our comfort zone and go for it? Because if I look at it in that sense, is that some people, and myself included, were guilty of it, is that you end up on this career path where you just see, and when I worked at a manufacturing site, all I lived and breathed was, and that's all I ever knew, because I never looked outside to the big bad world out there and never thought, oh, there's more out there for me. And now that I am part of that space, and I am an open-minded person, is that now I'm actually like, wow, like there's so much more out there. I think people just become comfortable, and I think what people need to do is get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that's where we create the gap, is because people become too comfortable in their little own niche area, that they just, you're an automation engineer and that's it, or you're an IT specialist and that's it. Actually, no, there's more to life than that. So if you're willing to be open-minded and you're an agile learner and you're willing to just go out there and stick your toes in the water, see what it's like, then the world's your oyster. I don't think there's any limitations in anyone stepping into the cybersecurity space at all, depending on where you come from.
Perfect. That's fantastic. Right. We are at the end, and I'm sorry to everybody that's asked questions that we couldn't get round to. What I will do is make sure we get answers back to everybody that hasn't been addressed here. So it's been really engaging, actually. So thanks everyone for joining and posing the questions, and a massive thank you to all the speakers, to Sam, John, Kim, and Asif. It's a great session. Really enjoyed it. Feel free to reach out to me and the panelists in future. This community is about getting people connected, networking, and learning from each other. So, you know, we're here if you want to connect. And this session's recorded. So, you know, if you want to share it with anybody, great. I'll be putting it up on LinkedIn to get some more coverage of it. And if you get the chance to like it and share it on there, great. It will help the community to grow. It will increase the engagement. So thanks everyone for joining. Love the session. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend. And we'll speak soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
See you
everyone.
later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.